This is a witch hunt. The words hit the Senate hearing room the way they always did when Ilhan Omar spoke them, with the force of moral certainty. The cadence of someone who had been hunted before and survived. The volume of a woman who had learned early in life that silence gets you killed. This is a witch hunt against the Somali community. You are targeting Muslim Americans. You are using this committee, this hearing room to criminalize an entire people. This is Islamophobia, and every American watching this should be terrified of what this administration is doing. She was standing. She wasn't supposed to be standing. Witnesses at Senate hearings sit. But Ilhan Omar had never been particularly interested in what she was supposed to do. She was pointing at the man in the presiding officer's chair, her finger rigid, her voice filling the Russell Senate office building hearing room with the practiced fury that had made her the most famous and the most controversial member of the United States House of Representatives. The man in the chair was the Vice President of the United States. J.D. Vance sat with his hands folded on the desk in front of him. He did not react to the finger. He did not react to the volume. He did not shift in his chair or reach for his water or look to his counsel or do any of the things that people do when they are uncomfortable with being shouted at. He sat the way a man sits who grew up in a house where shouting was the baseline, where his mother's boyfriend screamed and his mother screamed back, and the police came and left. And came again. And the only person who never screamed was his grandmother, who spoke quietly because she had learned in the hills of eastern Kentucky that quiet people are the ones you listen to. He waited until Omar finished. He let the silence settle. 2 seconds, 3. Long enough for the C-SPAN cameras to register the contrast. Her fury, his stillness. Then he spoke, and his voice was the voice of Southern Ohio, Appalachian at the edges, unhurried. The voice of a man who had written a best-selling book about his own poverty and knew how to use a story the way a lawyer uses evidence. "Congresswoman Omar," he said, "I appreciate you being here today. Before we proceed, I'd like to share something with the committee. It's not in the briefing packet. It's personal." He paused. Not for drama, for memory. I grew up in Middletown, Ohio. My mother was addicted to OxyContin and heroin. She cycled through rehab, relapse, boyfriends, and evictions so many times that by the time I was 12, I'd stopped counting. My father signed away his parental rights before I was old enough to understand what that meant. I lived with my grandmother, a woman named Bonnie Vance, who everyone called Mama, who had left the hills of Jackson, Kentucky, with an 8th-grade education and a temper that could peel paint, because she was the only adult in my life who stayed sober long enough to keep me safe. I ate government cheese. I wore shoes from Goodwill. I ate school lunch because it was the biggest meal I was going to get that day. My town was dying. Steel mills closing, opioid epidemic destroying families, people I grew up with overdosing in bathrooms and parking lots. I watched it happen. I lived in it. He looked at Omar. "I'm not lecturing you from privilege, Congresswoman. I'm asking you from the same place you came from poverty, from struggle, from a system that forgot about people like us. The difference between us isn't where we started. It's what we did with the chance America gave us. When this country gave me an opportunity, I put on a Marine Corps uniform and went to Iraq. When this country gave you an opportunity, you used your seat in Congress to call the September 11th attacks. Some people did something. To compare the United States military to the Taliban. To author a bill that was exploited for $250 million in fraud. I'm not targeting your religion. I'm not targeting your community. I'm asking you what your constituents in Minneapolis are asking. What did you do with the opportunity this country gave you? Silence. The kind that recalibrates a room. The kind where 40 senators and 200 spectators and a dozen cameras simultaneously understand that the hearing they expected is not the hearing they're going to get. To understand how they arrived here, the Vice President of the United States and a Congresswoman from Minnesota's 5th District, two people who had both known hunger as children, sitting across from each other in a room built of marble and mahogany and 200 years of democratic tradition, you have to go back to the morning. Ilhan Omar arrived at the Russell Building at 8:15, flanked by her attorney, her chief of staff, and two communication staffers who had spent the previous 72 hours preparing for what they called, in the shorthand of political crisis management, the playbook. The playbook was simple because it had always worked. When Republicans attack Ilhan Omar, the attack is always about the same thing: her identity. She is Muslim. She is Somali. She is an immigrant. She wears a hijab. She represents a district that Republicans love to demonize. Every attack, regardless of its stated subject, financial disclosures, campaign finance, foreign policy statements, the feeding our future scandal, is at its root about who she is rather than what she's done. And the defense against an identity attack is an identity defense. They'll go after feeding our future, said her attorney, a former DOJ prosecutor named Rachel Stein. They'll try to connect you to the fraud through the Meals Act. Standard guilt by association. We respond with, the bill was designed to feed children during a pandemic. The fraud was committed by criminals who exploited a program. And the suggestion that you're responsible for the actions of criminals is the same logic that blames every Muslim for the actions of terrorists. Then they'll pivot to your public statements. Some people did something. The IPAC tweet, the Taliban comparison. These are old news. We don't relitigate. We redirect. This hearing is supposed to be about fraud in federal programs, not about tweets from 2019. And if Vance gets personal, he won't, Stein said. He's the vice president. He has to maintain decorum. He'll ask procedural questions and let the Republican senators do the attacking. Omar scrolled through her phone. The squad group chat was already active. AOC posting support, Presley messaging solidarity. The hashtag #ProtectIlhan was climbing. Every Republican hearing became a fundraising cycle. Refugee girl survives war, survives camps, survives Trump, survives the right-wing machine. The attacks made her stronger. That was the entire model. What Omar's team had not prepared for, because it had never occurred to them, because no Republican had ever done it, was an opponent who could match her poverty story with his own. They had researched Vance, Yale Law, venture capital, senator, vice president, the profile of a man born into the Republican establishment who had written a book about poor people to make himself rich. They hadn't internalized the mother who overdosed in the Walmart parking lot, or the kid who showed up to Marine Corps basic training not knowing how to balance a checkbook. They knew the title Hillbilly Elegy, but they didn't know the story, and the story was the weapon. 3 blocks away, J.D. Vance sat with his staff reviewing a folder that was notably thin. It contained almost no financial data. Those were Speaker Johnson's tools. Vance's folder contained something different. Transcripts, tweets, video timestamps. The public record of Ilhan Omar's own words. She's going to play the identity card, said his chief of staff, Kevin Gallagher. Islamophobia, xenophobia. It's all she has. I know, Vance said. And it's going to bounce off me like a rubber ball off a brick wall because I'm not attacking her identity. I'm reading her words. I enlisted because of 9/11, Vance said quietly. A lot of kids did. Some of them didn't come home. And she called it Some people did something. I'm going to read that back to her, and then I'm going to tell her about Mama. My grandmother left Kentucky at 13, worked in factories her whole life, never complained about America, because she remembered what it was like to have nothing. Omar came here as a refugee. My grandmother came to Middletown as a hillbilly. Same story, different ending. I'm going to let America see both endings and decide which one they respect. The hearing began at 10 Hodrinquar, officially titled Oversight of Federal Nutrition Programs. Examining the Feeding Our Future fraud. Witnesses testified about the mechanics of the $250 million stolen from a program designed to feed children during a pandemic. The organizations were mostly clustered in Minneapolis's Cedar Riverside neighborhood, the heart of the Somali-American community. Omar listened with practiced stillness. Then it was her turn. She took her seat and delivered an opening statement. I was born in Mogadishu, Somalia. I spent 4 years in a refugee camp. I came to this country as a 12-year-old girl who spoke no English. And I am here today because the majority party has decided once again to use the suffering of my community as a political weapon. She looked at Vance. Mr. Vice President, you sit in that chair, a man born with every advantage in this country, and you dare to use this committee to target a refugee, because doing so serves your political agenda. This hearing is not about fraud. It is about fear. Fear of immigrants. Fear of a black woman who dares to speak truth. Vance waited. Congresswoman, he said, I need to correct something you said. You described me as a man born with every advantage. I was born in Middletown, Ohio. My mother was addicted to heroin. She cycled through rehab 18 times. My father signed away his parental rights. By the time I was in middle school, I had lived in 5 different houses. The only constant was my grandmother, who had nothing, just a willingness to work in a factory. I wore shoes from Goodwill. I joined the Marine Corps because I didn't know how to fill out a college application. So, when you say I was born with every advantage, with deep respect for everything you survived, you're talking to someone who also survived. Different country, same poverty. The difference between us isn't where we started. The difference is what we chose to do with the chance America gave us. The room shifted. Vance had collapsed her frame. He wasn't the powerful man attacking the vulnerable woman. He was the other poor kid asking about choices. Congresswoman, I'd like to discuss some of the things you've said. On March 23, 2019, you described the September 11th attacks as some people did something. 2,977 people died that day. Firefighters ran upstairs they knew they wouldn't come down. And you described it as some people did something. I enlisted in 2003 because of what happened on September 11th. We didn't enlist for money. We enlisted because terrorists murdered nearly 3,000 Americans. When you describe the worst attack in American history as some people did something, you're not dissenting. You're diminishing. You're reducing murder to a footnote in your own victimhood narrative. Omar leaned forward. I was talking about the impact on Muslim American civil liberties. Then say that, Vance said. Say the 9/11 attacks were horrific. But that's not what you said. You said some people did something. He turned to the next tab. June 7th, 2021, you tweeted, We have seen unthinkable atrocities committed by the U.S., Hamas, Israel, Afghanistan, and the Taliban. You put the United States of America in the same sentence as Hamas and the Taliban. The country that took you in gave you citizenship, education, a congressional seat. You placed it alongside terrorist organizations that stone women and execute homosexuals. 12 members of your own party condemned you. Speaker Pelosi said your comparison foments prejudice. You didn't apologize. You clarified. There's a difference. Apologizing means you understand what you did wrong. Clarifying means you think the problem is that people misunderstood you. You are taking my words out of context, Omar said. I'm reading your words in full, Vance replied. US, Hamas, Israel, Afghanistan, Taliban. Same sentence, same moral framework. We understand perfectly. He continued. February 2019, you tweeted support for Israel was all about the Benjamin's baby. The implication that Jewish money controls American politics is one of the oldest anti-Semitic tropes. Your own leadership called on you to apologize. You cannot demand tolerance for yourself while trafficking in prejudice against others. Tolerance is not a one-way street. Now, I want to talk about why we're actually in this room today. The $250 million. In 2020, you authored the Meals Act. The bill reduced oversight requirements. What happened next is the largest pandemic fraud prosecution in American history. $250 million stolen from a program designed to feed hungry children. The money was laundered to purchase luxury cars and real estate. The majority of charged individuals are members of the community you claim to protect. And in December, the Treasury Department announced an investigation into whether any stolen funds were channeled to Al-Shabaab, Al-Qaeda's affiliate in Somalia, the country whose warlords created the crisis you fled. When asked about this link, you said any link would be a failure of the FBI. $250 million stolen from a program you authored, and your response is to blame the FBI. If even a fraction reached Al-Shabaab, then a program designed to feed American children funded an organization that murders African children. Omar broke. This is racist. This is Islamophobic. You are targeting a black woman because you cannot accept I have a voice. You have the audacity to sit there and lecture me about gratitude. Vance didn't flinch. Congresswoman, let me tell you about someone. Her name was Mama Bonnie Vance. She was born in the hollers of eastern Appalachia. No indoor plumbing. She left at 13 with nothing. She got a job in a factory, married a man who drank too much, and raised a grandson who didn't know how to fill out a college application. She was a refugee, congresswoman, not from a war zone, but from poverty. And she said thank you every day. She flew an American flag. She knew in her bones that the country that gave her a chance was the greatest country on earth. She died in 2005 while I was in Iraq. If she were sitting here today, she'd say to you, "This country saved your life. Act like it." The hearing room was silent. Two American stories had collided, Middletown and Mogadishu. The collision was about whether the right response to being saved is gratitude or grievance. You and I both came from nothing, Vance said. We both know hunger. I wake up every morning deeply grateful that I live in the only country on earth that would give a kid like me the chance to become vice president. You came here as a 12-year-old girl with nothing. This country gave you safety, citizenship, education, and a seat in the United States Congress. And from that seat, you called the worst attack on American soil. Some people did something. I am not questioning your religion. I am questioning what you did with the gift of being here. America gives us both the same gift. The question is whether you receive that gift with gratitude or with contempt. America doesn't ask for gratitude. You can criticize this country. That's your right. But there is a line between criticism and contempt. When you equate the U.S. military with the Taliban, you have crossed that line. And the saddest part is that the people who pay the price aren't you. It's the Somali Americans who are now associated with a $250 million fraud they had nothing to do with. It's the immigrants from Vietnam, Cuba, Nigeria who watch you and wonder if you remember the citizenship oath at all. He looked at her one last time. 2 kids who grew up with nothing. 2 adults given everything. One said, "Thank you." One said, "Some people did something. I yield to the committee." Omar stood. Her attorney reached for her. She pulled away. "You don't get to tell an immigrant how to feel. I will not be lectured by a man who wrote a book blaming poor people and used it to get rich." Vance's response was 6 words. "I'm reading what you said." The hearing closed. Omar walked out without stopping for cameras. For the first time in her career, she had nothing to say to the press. The clips traveled in fragments. The Mama story went viral. The closing, "America doesn't ask for gratitude, but it deserves better than contempt," had 62 million views in 48 hours. The most damaging part was the response from other immigrants. A 71-year-old Vietnamese boat person recorded a video. "When that woman says, 'Some people did something,' she does not speak for me. America saved my family." A Cuban professor wrote, "Gratitude was the foundation of our house." Omar held a press conference 4 hours later, calling the hearing Islamophobic. She addressed the framing, but did not address her specific quotes, the $250 million, or Mema. 60 million people noticed what she didn't say. The word ungrateful attached itself to her. It wasn't a word Vance used. He used contempt, but the public translated it. She entered as a refugee who survived everything. She left as a woman who had been given everything and thanked no one. Mama would have known the answer. She always did.